public schools to feed our children meals or to provide them counseling. And so I would submit to you that this election is about protecting the very soul of public education and then getting to work on bringing to reality a bold vision for public education. And I would submit to you that it ought to be done with someone who has the experience to do so. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Michelle?
Oh, get ready.
Hi, thank you again to all of you that are here this morning and those that are watching at home and to the organizers of this event. I appreciate the opportunity.
Why does she own a white blazer?
Yes, I do understand that this is a huge undertaking and it is also an awesome responsibility because education is the great opportunity. Education is what lifts families and entire communities out of poverty. It is what is going to provide the leaders that we are going to need to maintain our state and our nation being safe and prosperous and free. You know, there was a time in North Carolina history when our education system was a beacon in the South. It was when teachers were allowed to teach, when we were focused on writing and reading, and when math made sense. It was when teachers and parents were working together to solve the problems in our schools and to ensure that every student, regardless of what zip code they live in, gets a sound basic education and is able to reach their fullest potential. There was a time when our families could celebrate greatly whenever their child walked across a stage and got their diploma because they knew that their children were ready to enter into and to be successful as adults. There was a time when our students knew what it meant to respect authority and to honor their elders, and that they were proud and that they were appreciative for being citizens in the United States of America. You know, there was a time when the only concern with parents when they dropped their children off in the early morning hours was, are they going to make a friend today? Are they going to come home and be disappointed that maybe they were the last one picked for the kickball team? But now, ladies and gentlemen, we are in crisis. We are not serving our students, our teachers, our parents, or our administrators well. With only 25% of 8th graders across the state of North Carolina who are at grade level for reading or math or science, we are failing to provide for them the opportunities that they're going to need to be able to pursue careers and to be able to compete in the global marketplace. There's a problem with the system. And unfortunately, my opponent is an integral part of that failure in our system.
Oh my God.
And that's why we desperately need somebody who is an outsider, somebody who is a concerned citizen, somebody who is going to bring in innovative and creative new ideas, somebody who is going to solve these problems and be the voice of the people of the entire state of North Carolina.
Somebody who calls children with disabilities retarded.
Students and not the system. It's time for us to ensure that we make good on our promise that every student reaches their fullest potential, and upon leaving our K through 12 education system, they are ready to soar. They have the tools, they have the equipment, they have the ability to be critical thinkers, to be problem solvers, to be the leaders, the engineers, the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the future civil servants, the parents, and the proud Americans that we need to ensure that we stay a constitutional republic. And I'm going to work with all of you as your superintendent to make sure that the education system in North Carolina is the greatest in the nation.
That is the dumbest shit I have ever heard in my life. She wants to not accept federal dollars.
Portion of our debate now.
$1 billion she doesn't want.
Just a minute to respond to these, and you'll get a little friendly reminder here when you have 15 seconds left. That'll be the yellow card. Michelle, we're going to start with you. What do you view as the top three problems facing our children's education in North Carolina?
She has never been in public school,
The
FYI.
first thing is safety and discipline in the classroom. If children and staff do not feel safe, they don't feel respected, then learning is not going to happen. And that is why when I won the primary on March 5th, the first thing I did was I created a school safety advisory council with professionals not just in North Carolina, but places from Florida and even from Washington, D.C. and South Carolina. And we are going to ensure that no parent is concerned about their student coming home at the end of the day. It's time for us to acknowledge that if our children do not understand the boundaries, if our teachers do not have the support of our administrators, where they are going to have control of the classroom, and the administrators,
If we don't pay teachers, we don't have teachers. So that's not the problem. The teachers need paid. That's why we don't have any.
The second thing is we have to focus on academics over activism.
That is the dumbest, oh my God.
No one leaves elementary school without mastering reading, writing, and math. And the third is that all of our spending needs to focus on the students, classrooms, and grassroots staff before it goes to the bureaucracy.
What the hell is grassroots staff?
Mo, the top 3 problems facing our children's education in North Carolina.
Mo, a savior.
Great. So
Thank
I would
goodness.
certainly lead off with lack of funding
Ah!
for our public schools. I already provided some data that makes it pretty clear that we need more funding in our public schools.
Amen.
Second would be reverence for our educators so that they can do the work that they are called upon to do. We have gotten away from this being recognized as a noble profession. And then third, I would certainly lift up safety as well as a major issue. And it is in many ways remarkable to me that my opponent would lift up safety when her idea is to execute folks. She's called for the execution, for example, of President Biden, called for the execution of Governor Cooper. It's called for the execution of Barack Obama, public execution on pay-per-view.
This is
I have
great.
much experience with regards to dealing with safety issues.
Oh, yeah.
I'll stick with something that each of you just said here and give
She's
you a
executing
follow-up on
people.
a suggestion or
Safety.
suggestions to address one of these top-tier issues. You mentioned reverence. Mo. If you would, spend a minute, please, and tell us how you view a pathway toward improving upon our reverence toward public school educators.
Absolutely. So first of all, it starts with a mindset. We've got to change our mindset. So we've got to get away from calling our educators groomers and part of a cesspool of evil lies and deception, or like her ally, calling them wicked people. As opposed to that, we must bring back this sense of this is a noble profession. Then we must advocate for increased compensation for our educators. We also need to work on working conditions for our educators, taking away many of the additional responsibilities that continually are being placed on our educators so they can do the work that they're called to do. And then finally, I would lift up, we absolutely must have effective and strong leaders in each and every one of our schools, because based on my experience, educators do respond well and want to stay when they are led by an effective leader.
Amen.
Thank you. Michelle, you mentioned safety. Give us a suggestion.
I need cameras in the bathrooms.
This issue.
Absolutely. Our schools should be the safest buildings in the state. Everyone inside of our building, the majority, 99%, are women or children. And if we cannot ensure that they are
Not her.
safe and that they have the great work and learning environment, then what can we say about ourselves as a community? But I'll say the first thing we need is our SROs in every school.
We have
SROs
those, dummy.
in every school. We need a code of conduct. We need for parents, teachers, and staff to understand what is going to be expected in conduct as well as academic performance.
And we have that too.
Words mean a lot. And when he's talking about revering teacher and when he's talking about safety, it's important that we recognize that Mo Green, when he was the executive director of Z. Smith Reynolds, he not only vetted but also championed the funding of 2 groups called Building Peace and the Education Justice Alliance, both of which have teamed together, and their quote is that their goal is to remove every SRO from Wake County schools. I don't know about you all, but if
I'm a
you look
fact
at
checker,
Wake
and that's a
County,
lie.
in the last week, we have had more than 5 schools on lockdown. That is absolutely irresponsible. He's dangerous.
Oh
for
my
staff
God.
and students of North Carolina schools.
Right.
We are going to turn to school safety in a moment. Before we do that, and this next question is going to go to Mo first. Tell us, if you would, please, what you view as the top 2 most important duties of the state superintendent of public instruction, and how you plan to go about carrying them. In just a minute, please.
Correct. So the top 2 duties, number 1 is to be the Chief Administrative Officer for Public Schools. The second is to be the Chief Advocacy Officer for Public Schools. So with regards to the Chief Administrative Officer, that is leading and managing a department of over 100, and I have much experience in doing that with even larger organizations. It requires setting a vision, bringing on a leadership team that can execute on that vision, being sure that everyone follows in line, supporting folks, and then if necessary, moving people out if they're not aligned with the vision as well. And then advocacy is to always remember that in this instance, we are advocating on behalf of public schools. Public schools is where we need to be focused. And so we need to be sure that we're lifting up all of the good in our public schools, even as we're making reforms and improvements related to our public schools.
And if y'all need a question again, just ask me as we swing back and forth here. Michelle, the top 2 most important.
I'm going to
duties of the state
homeschool
superintendent,
everybody.
how you would plan to carry them out.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think the most important, as Mo had mentioned, is an advocacy. This is an advocacy role. But who we need to be advocating for is the citizens of North Carolina. We are not here to advocate for a system. Do I believe that the public school system should be the absolute best option in the state of North Carolina? 100%. And right now, that is not the case.
You don't know
that because we have tens of thousands of families of teachers who are fleeing the system. They are leaving what they were called to do because they don't feel like they are getting the resources, they're not getting the support, and they are not able to do what they want to do, which is called to teach. They are having to push an agenda. And so I'm going to advocate for families, for students, for staff, and I'm going to ensure that the laws are obeyed in every single one of our 115 districts, because it should not matter
the laws.
Who is on your school board as to whether or not you get an excellent education and whether or not you are inundated with political and social activism in your classroom.
That is the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
We've already touched on school safety this morning. I'm going to ask you to build on it. School safety is an important topic in the news, as just seen this week. What strategies, and you mentioned some already, Michelle, SROs is one example. You can build on that, or you could go with additional strategies that you support to keep children and educators safe.
I absolutely believe that our children know what is right and wrong, and they feel more confident and less anxious when there are boundaries. You know, we have an increasing depression, anxiety, and even a confusion within our young people. That has been stated again and again. And part of that is children need to know what to expect, and they need to know that if they are not able to handle a situation, or somebody else in their class potentially is not able to keep themselves under control, they need to know that a healthy, trusted adult is going to come back in and bring peace and civility into the schools. And that should be our administrators' #1 job. Administrators' #1 job should be to ensure that we are creating a culture of collaboration, of teamwork, of support, so that the entire school is looking toward success. I look at it as a team environment. I think we should be keeping kids to learn how to act rather than just always doing things that are punitive. We need to be redirecting.
What the hell is she talking about?
Behavior. We need to be being a good example of that, and we need to make our schools a place that the teachers and the students cannot wait to get there in the morning.
Most strategies to support keeping children and educators safe, please.
Great. I'll lift up 4. First will be, I do believe that we need more mental health professionals working with our students. Many of our students are going through significant challenges, and so having more mental health professionals with and around our children will make a substantial difference. Second, I believe we must have effective relationships with our law enforcement. Please understand that when I was deputy superintendent of Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, we had our own law enforcement division that reported directly to me. I understand what it takes to work effectively with law enforcement. Third, hardening of facilities. Critically important that we be sure that our environment is as safe as it can be. So that would be things like thinking about double entries, mental metal detectors for our facilities. And then finally, character development. I think it's important that our children understand how to comport themselves up as among many others that you can do to try to improve safety in each and every one of our schools.
Mo, we will stick with you for our next question. North Carolina public school teachers rank 38th in average pay and 48th in the nation in cost-adjusted PPE. The North Carolina Supreme Court has ruled that our public schools are underfunded. Just this week at the North Carolina General Assembly, there was a vote to add an additional $464 million to fund private school vouchers, so-called opportunity scholarships for mostly wealthy families whose children attend private school, which means they will spend nearly $500 million in additional funding this fiscal year on private school vouchers. That bill, as just a contextual note, is now before the governor. What is your stance on funding for private school vouchers available regardless of family income?
Great. So I am opposed to the taxpayer-funded private school voucher program. The dollars that we're just talking about, which will turn into literally billions of dollars, I believe should be in our public schools. This is how you make our public schools better. These are public dollars, and so they should be in our public schools. This is deeply troubling when you think about now the wealthiest of the wealthy, those who can already afford to send their child to a private school.
And it would appear to me that with Republican supermajorities that this is likely to become law at some point, notwithstanding the veto of the governor, which we expect. So with that as kind of our backdrop, we're going to follow up with you here, Michelle. How do you think that this additional funding will impact public schools?
She did not answer the
particularly
question.
in terms of those schools, those 115 districts that you mentioned, needing additional funds, asking for additional funds to deal with low teacher pay and overall funding for our public schools.
Let me say, our teachers need to be treated like the professionals that they are. And do I believe that they should absolutely have an excellent salary so they don't have to get 2 jobs? Because teaching is already probably 2 jobs, maybe 4. And do they have to be providing for their classroom resources? That's absurd. That needs to be taken care of. But under my administration, we are going to cut things like CRT and DEI and SEL and the things that we are doing with our students, that we are dumping hundreds of millions of dollars every year into things that are not helping our children academically. They're not improving their character development, as evidenced by the increase in crime and violence, the increase in depression and anxiety, the increase in bullying. It's not working. So we need to go back to actually just having our children be focused on reading, writing, and math, and critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, conflict resolution. That's what needs to happen. We, as a critical care nurse, I spent years figuring out what the life-threatening issue was and dealing with it. We are in a critical situation with our public education system. We need to focus on the basics.
Mo, same follow-up question to you. How do you believe this nearly $500 million will impact public schools, especially in terms of needing these funds to deal with lower teacher pay and overall funding?
Great. So I think the impact will be dramatic. First of all, you're talking about our teachers. At the same time that you increase this funding to private schools, our teachers did not receive any increase at all. And so you're talking about now having it much more difficult to recruit and retain educators. Gosh, how many more teacher assistants one could have in our public schools to work with our public school students. Gosh, even my opponent has talked about more SROs. How many more SROs, if that's where you want to go, could we have working with our public school students? I'm talking about lowering class sizes so that our educators could work as effectively as they could with a smaller group of students so that they could get the educational opportunities that they so richly deserve. The impact will be tremendous and ongoing because we're now talking about this happening now for going into the future, which will be literally billions of dollars.
Private schools that receive these vouchers, tax funded, do not play by the same rules as public schools, as they lack sufficient oversight. I'm going to start with you, Mo, on this question. Do you think private schools that use public dollars should be held accountable for how they spend the money and how students are performing academically?
So let me start here. Again, I want to be abundantly clear. I do not believe the dollars that are in public dollars, our taxpayer dollars, should be going to private schools. And so I want to be sure that folks understand that first, because you don't get to the accountability question, because I don't believe the dollars should even be going there. Certainly, anytime that taxpayer dollars are going anywhere, those dollars we should, as a public, should know what we're getting for them. We should know that, yes, we are getting some positive result in return on those dollars. There's no question about that. And so how one does that, we'd have to work out. But it's clearly the case that if you're putting these dollars where I don't believe they should be going, then sure, we absolutely should say, well, what results are we getting? And it's amazing that up to this point, there has been no accountability, with hundreds of millions of dollars already going to private schools. So we don't know what's happening in our private schools with our public dollars.
Michelle?
Sure. I think accountability is huge. I think the fact that we have had over 800 schools in North Carolina that have had failing, these are public traditional schools that have been failing for over 3 years. We absolutely need accountability. I'm going to tell you this. Does money matter? Absolutely. But you know what matters more? How you spend that money. And Mo Green spent 7 years as the superintendent of public schools in Guilford County. Did he raise all of the teacher pay so that everybody wants to work in Guilford? I sure don't see that. How about this? He brags about the fact that he increased the graduation rate 17 points, 18 points. Well, you know what didn't raise? Anybody's competency in math or in reading. So I absolutely agree with accountability, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that every school that is getting public funds underneath the DPI, which includes charter schools and traditional public schools, is accountable to how they're spending their money and how they're spending their time and the resources that they're giving to their teachers and into the classrooms.
Michelle, you mentioned charter schools. This is another reform effort that generates plenty of debate. Plenty say that it's unfair that charter schools play by some different rules and that they lack sufficient oversight. You might have just responded to that to a degree, but how would you respond to those concerns?
Well, I absolutely believe that anybody that's getting the public funds from taxpayer funds needs to be held accountable to the same standards. But I also think that we need to bridge this gap between charter schools and traditional public schools, because all of us have the same goal. All of us want for our students to be successful, right? Everybody, it doesn't matter your race, religion, or your politics. What difference does it make what classroom they're sitting in if they are getting the education they need in order to be able to be successful adults? We've got to stop this infighting, and we need to see how we can come to the table and we can determine what is going to be best for our students, and how can we determine that whether you choose charter school for your child or whether you choose traditional public school, both of them are going to be excellent. And we're going to get teachers that want to stay in both. That's important too. We talk about recruitment and retainment. I just want to put this in there real quick. When you look at teacher surveys, the #1 complaint they have is that they don't feel safe in the classroom. We've got to handle that first if we're going to get teachers, excellent teachers, to come and to stay and spend a career training up the next generation.
Recruitment and retention in just a moment. But first, Mo, how would you respond to those
I
concerns?
didn't get the question.
I know.
If you don't mind repeating the question.
I don't at all. Thank you for asking. Charter schools are another reform effort that generates plenty of debate. Many say that it's unfair that charter schools play by different rules and that they lack sufficient oversight. How would you respond to those concerns?
Certainly charter schools play by different rules, but I actually was one when they were first implemented, said this would be a good thing. And we don't have to have the same rules as traditional public schools because charter schools should be a place of innovation. And maybe it's some of the rules that we have in place that's blocking the innovation. In fact, when I was superintendent of Guilford County Schools, I actually utilized a charter school system along with a private school to start a middle school preparatory academy. And just to mention a little bit more about GCS, yes, we did raise graduation rates dramatically. And yes, we actually did increase the performance of students on any number of different exams. And so my opponent may not be able to fully appreciate what we were able to do in GCS, but we do know that there was increased academic performance in Guilford County schools while I was there.
Our next question will start with Mo Green. North Carolina has a well-documented teacher recruitment and retention crisis. What strategies will you advocate for to improve teacher recruitment and retention?
So the first thing I think we have to do is, again, we have to start with that mindset. Be sure that folks understand that this is a noble profession. We must revere them. Secondly, I do believe we've got to focus on increased compensation for our teachers. And where I would start is base compensation for our teachers. I'm not opposed. In fact, I utilize all kinds of incentives to increase the outcomes, if you will, for teachers and students. But I believe that until we get the base compensation lifted, then we're not going to really make a dramatic difference. Then certainly, I believe we have to focus on working conditions for our educators. As I stated earlier, there are many, many things that we're putting on top of our teachers year after year after year. We must start pulling back on that so that they can focus on education of the students. And then certainly, again, strong leadership does matter. And so trying to be sure that we have strong leaders in place in each and every one of our schools.
Strategies for recruitment and retention.
Yes, absolutely. I think that we have got to, like my opponent said, we have got to make sure that our administrators are setting up a team atmosphere. In my opinion, that those administrators are the head coaches and the teachers are the assistant coaches and the students are like athletes and then the parents are to be the booster club. When everybody is working together and everybody's doing the best at whatever their role is, everybody ends up succeeding at the end. And we need to create more of that unity within our school environment. The other thing I would do is I would expand the advanced teacher roles that we actually have pilot programs in some of our districts right now, so that teachers can stay connected to that classroom, not necessarily have to go on to administration to get pay raises, and they can help the next generation of new teachers to be able to stay in there and to get the tools that they need to be successful and to see their students successful. I'd also like to increase the teacher cadet program so that our juniors and seniors can actually work half the day as a teacher's assistant. So by the time they decide whether or not they want to go to school to be an educator, they feel like they've had 2 years already. So mentoring is going to be important as well.
Your opponent mentioned incentive-based pay, and we'll turn back to you in a moment, Mo. Do you think using a pay-for-performance model for public school teachers would help in recruiting and retaining?
I think we've got to raise the base pay for our teachers to get people here. I also believe that what we need to do is we need to pay teachers more in more difficult areas to find a teacher. Like I think special ed, I think potentially if people are bilingual and you're going to help us with the ESL program, that would be excellent. I think that also we look at rural areas where it is so hard to recruit and retain teachers because maybe there's not a lot of infrastructure. So a married couple might have, their spouse might have a difficult time finding a job in that area. We need to really look at investing into those teachers and into that staff to ensure that our students can have the same teacher for the entire year. Right now, they're not getting that. A lot of places we are 6,000 teachers short, and so we're using substitute teachers, and that is not creating a continuity, and it's not going to help our students to get the success that they need, that they could have if we had continuity with our teaching staff.
I'm going to go off script for a moment. I don't think they can replace me at this point.
Okay.
Starting pay, $41,000. I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's $41,000. What should starting pay be?
I'd like to see it between 50 and 55, to be honest with you.
Okay. And what about the ceiling?
I don't know why there has to be a ceiling. I mean, in any other profession, there isn't one. If you're doing excellent work and you're willing to take on more responsibilities and you can, you're there for 20 and 30 years and you're willing to then be mentoring and be somebody that's helping the new generation of teachers to be successful, I don't know why we have to put a cap on it.
We're going to come right back to pay for performance, but I want to give you that opportunity as well, Mo. What would you like to see the floor of pay, base pay, for public school educators and the ceiling?
So I certainly think that the base pay floor should be at least 55. I'd like it to be at 60 or even more. And then as far as ceiling, I agree with my opponent. Why do we need to have a ceiling? We ought to think about this as being a profession where you can make a significant amount of money because of the transformative value that our educators are making in educating our children, the transformative value with our economy, the state, the nation. So no problem with not having a cap at this point.
I think I heard you before mention incentivized pay for performance model for teachers. I think you've already acknowledged that it would likely help in recruiting and retention. You can build on that if you would like, but I'm going to maybe go next level with you here, which is how would you use an incentivized model? In what ways?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to be, again, very clear that I would start with base pay and lifting up base pay and getting that right first. And then you think about incentives on top of that or supportive of that. And there are any number of things that one could look at. Certainly you could look at recruitment incentives, particularly for hard to fill positions. Oftentimes you do need to bring in, put additional dollars out there. You think about performance, and I would think about both individual and school performance, with actually more emphasis being placed on school performance than individual performance, because while an individual teacher can make a substantial difference, it's often the entire school that's doing various things that's allowing even that wonderful teacher to perform better. And then certainly retention incentives, I think are important as well. And so, and again, I utilized all of those things when I was superintendent of Guilford County Schools, so I have lots of experience in trying to make all of that work, obviously with limited resources to do so.
Stay on the left side of your screen for our next question. One last query about recruitment. How can our state better recruit and retain more teachers of color?
Yeah, so there are any number of things that I believe our state needs to do. The first of which is to recognize that we do need to have more teachers of color in our schools. Our schools are becoming more and more diverse as with regards to our students, and it would be beneficial for our students to be able to see themselves in teachers in every school building. Various activities to do that. I do believe that we need to go to campuses and specifically recruit individuals of color and talk with them about this opportunity for them to become educators. Oftentimes they have pushed it aside for any variety of reasons. I think we have to go back and talk about the benefit that they could have to children. I think we should go to HBCUs as a starting point and even have a deeper conversation about whether you allow for students to say, in addition to whatever degree they're getting, to also get licensed to be a teacher as well.
Michelle, how can our state recruit and retain more teachers of color?
Well, I think we really need to change what the environment is happening, especially at our high school level. You know, across the state, we have less than 25% competency in our minority populations. And if they don't have mastery of the teaching, if they don't have an experience where they have been mentored or they see that this is something that if they want to get out of the school, like let's think about this. If you're in high school or you're in middle school and you're witnessing a fight almost every other day, if you're scared to go to the bathroom because you're worried about being attacked or you're worried about that it smells like pot smoke or whatever it might be, if you're seeing teachers be disrespected, if you're seeing teachers just struggling to be able to get people to focus and to be able to get people to do what they need to do to be successful, why would you want to go into teaching? So I think that's the first thing that we can do is really change the environment in our teaching, in our schools, so that the education experience is enjoyable for all of our students and they feel like they have been successful and they want to pour back into the next generation. I think that's where you start.
For over a quarter century, North Carolina has been engaged in a school funding case, a litigation case known as Leandro, of course. At issue is the state's constitutional obligation to provide a sound basic education for every child. The state developed the comprehensive remedial plan based on a report by WestEd. This was at the direction several years ago of a North Carolina Supreme Court judge. The plan describes in detail the increased investments necessary for our public schools to meet our constitutional obligations. Michelle, we're going to start with you. What recommendations in this landmark plan do you believe are the most critical?
Well, you know, most of the insights in that plan are already being dealt with in our budget. They're talking about having safety in our schools. It's talking about having quality educators. It's talking about being able to recruit and retain them. And really the premise of this back 30 some years ago was that every county, and Hope was the one really that started it. It was a one county issue, and then it grew to 5 counties, and now for some reason we've expanded it to be almost replacing the current budgetary decisions that we're making at the legislature. But I'll say this, I'm 100% in favor of the premise that it should not matter what county you live in. You should have every opportunity to be able to take advanced classes, to be able to take career preparedness classes, trades and technical, and actually that's one of my platforms, is wanting to expand that career and technical education opportunities and to partner with businesses in these rural areas to make sure that our students, which 62% of them do not go on to that four-year education, that they're ready to jump into a career when they cross that graduation stage.
Would you like me to re-rack the question?
No, I'm good. Thank you. So first of all, the Leandro case has been around for 30 years, and it, as an aside, the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation actually funds the low-wealth plaintiff school districts in that litigation. So please understand that this litigation would likely not be around but for Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. Now, most critical, more funding for our public schools is perhaps the most important thing in that report. We need to have more funding. That report indicates billions of additional dollars should be coming into our public schools. That will then allow us to do any number of things, everything from having more effective leadership in our schools, doing these kinds of programs that will bring in folks from other walks of life to become our principals, if you will. Recognize again that I actually led an effort along with 3 other districts to bring in more leaders into our public schools called the Piedmont Triad Leadership Academy. Certainly, we need to provide for more resources for our teachers, again, to take away some of those challenging issues that they face.
Mo, in your view, what are the most effective policies and or approaches to student discipline?
So I believe that the most effective things are to, number one, think about it in 2 ways. One is how do you build up character, and then how do you inform students that certain behaviors are not appropriate, and if you do certain behaviors, there needs to be consequences for those behaviors. So both are critically important, and oftentimes people only focus on the second, which is they do something wrong, we need to suspend them, take them out of school, etc. That doesn't actually do anything to help them learn how to have better behavior. So you got to have character development, I think, as a critical important of discipline. We have to understand that our students must learn how to comport themselves, how to think about certain things in a much more positive way, and then obviously having a code of conduct that is enforced in a equal way for all students becomes important to do as well.
Michelle, most effective policies and or approaches to student discipline.
Oh, Lord.
Well, I have to say that the code of conduct, I'm excited to hear him mention a code of conduct because that came from my website. So
Oh my God.
I think that that's a good idea. I will say that we have to make sure that all of the expectations are equal across the board. Laws should be obeyed in our schools just like they're obeyed out in the community. And we have to make sure that we are not determining whether somebody should be corrected based on the color of their skin. We need to make sure that our children, because children are filled with potential. Children want to please, they want to learn. And if you sat down kids in a kindergarten and first grade class, and at the beginning of the year you asked them, what are the rules that we should have in our classroom to ensure that everybody has a great experience? They're going to come up with the rules of being kind to one another and taking your turn and raising your hand and helping one another. Let them be the ones that are guiding that so that they understand. Then they have ownership of what is expected of them in the classroom. We don't always just need to be putting on rules and rules and rules on top of our kids. They know right from wrong, and we need to help them to be self-controlled in that area. But when someone cannot do that or will not do that, it's time for us to take them out of the classroom so that other students can learn, so that the teachers can teach.
Michelle, next question, we'll just begin with you. We have seen in recent years some districts' schools are resegregating. In your view, what is driving this trend?
I do not believe, segregation is a legal term, and there is no law on the books that I know of that is telling kids that you can or cannot go to a certain school. I think what we might be seeing is the fact that we do not have a quality education across the board. So parents are probably choosing to send their kids to another school and frantically trying to get them somewhere else where their kids are going to be able to learn, and they're going to be safe, and they're going to be able to reach their highest potential. So I don't see anything on the books that is, I think that's a parent choice as to where they're wanting their child to go.
What the hell?
Well,
So I think that there are any number of things that are driving resegregation. Certainly, neighborhoods can impact the types of students that might show up in a school, particularly in districts that allow for home schools. I think resegregation is also the result of decisions that are being made. For example, where you allow certain schools, like for example, charter schools that may not have requirements with regards to certain things like transportation or providing meals. Then there may only be certain types of kids who can get to those schools, which will then resegregate that school and other schools that those students are coming from. I think there's certainly policy decisions that have been made over the course of time that we've moved away from in our state and in our country with regards to saying that having desegregated schools is a vitally important thing that can help in the education of all children because you get to interact with each other. We've moved away from that, and so that policy change has certainly impacted the nature of schools as well.
as state superintendent, would you support a ban on smartphones or cell phones? And if so, what would that look like?
Yeah, so I certainly think that this is something we should be thinking deeply about. I'm not at a place where I'm going to say 100% that there should be a total ban on cell phones in all of our schools at all times. But I do think that we've got to figure out ways to limit the access of cell phones in our schools, because our students, I believe, are being inundated with all sorts of things that are distracting them from receiving the educational opportunities that they should be receiving in the classroom. And so that may ultimately lead to a more comprehensive ban, but I don't think that we should start there. We should think about what else we might do, both at a state level and at a local level, to understand the particular needs of our students and educators as well.
Michelle?
I think with the increase in bullying, and we know that there is pornography and there are people that are trying to get to our children, I think it's very dangerous to have our kids on a screen. When I talk about it as a nurse and the developmental issues that we're seeing in our young people with the frontal lobe, with their ability to maintain the impulse control, I think we absolutely need to remove the cell phones from the classroom. I'd also like to see a severe diminishment, if not removal, from our elementary school of handheld devices. I think it's very important for our students to have that face-to-face time with teachers.
Oh my God.
There's been much research done that shows that just 30 minutes a day of maybe a teacher with a small group of students 3 times a week, that improves their literacy, it improves their behavior, it improves their connection with one another significantly. And so I think we need to look at doing that as well.
Right now, I don't think we're going to get to all the questions because we're coming up on an hour, but I'm enjoying the conversation very much. We're going to work in at least one more here before the top of the hour. Each year, and let me just pause for a second. Mo had the first first. Michelle, this question will head to you first. Each year, local bills are filed at the General Assembly asking that calendar flexibility be given back to local school districts to set their own academic calendars. What is your position on local calendar flexibility?
I absolutely agree. I think local districts should determine that, and it should be determined by what their constituents want and what's best for the
the economy as well as the families that engage in the public school system.
Well,
I also agree that local school districts should have flexibility with regards to their calendars. It's really amazing to me that we're almost coming full circle on this, because I remember when school districts had that flexibility, and there was a lot of advocacy that ultimately led to legislation to remove that. Now we find ourselves, as often the case, when the folks who are actually working with schools understand what is needed, the voices finally get heard. And in this instance, people are finally hearing, give our schools the flexibility to do the delivery of education that will work best for their students in their particular community.
We are going to move on to closing statements here in a moment. I want to thank both of the candidates for being here today to participate in this forum. We recognize here in this room, I recognize as a former political reporter, that running for office is not easy. I think it has gotten harder in 2024. The time, the travel, the exhaustion, it is a burden on every candidate whose name appears on that ballot on November 5th, and those ballots that are going out soon. So thank you both for being here. At the risk of getting in a little bit of trouble, I will note that Michelle and Mo have agreed to a number of forums, and I would just encourage Josh Stein and Mark Robinson to come together and have a similar forum as they pursue the seat of governor of North Carolina. There are no scheduled debates.
Amen, because Mark Robinson's a chicken.
Recently that I'm not aware of. We're appreciative that you have been here, that you've joined us via the stream, and for those of you in the room as well. We're going to give each of you 3 minutes to make closing remarks. Mo, you went first at the beginning of our forum, so Michelle, please begin with your closing statement.
Certainly. I greatly appreciate and understand the incredible honor it is to be the Republican nominee for Superintendent of Public Instruction, because I believe that our children are the future. The direction where education goes determines the direction of our state. And we all know even the direction of North Carolina tends to determine the direction of the rest of the country. So I am running for this because I believe that our children are not receiving the education they need in order to be able to compete in the global marketplace. The fact that we had 1,473 teachers that were assaulted on the job last year is an atrocity. And we need to understand, those were only the teachers who actually went and reported that to law enforcement. Those didn't count the teachers who went to administrators and they were convinced not to report that. There is a reason why we have an exodus of teachers and we have an exodus of families from our public school system. And that is because we have politicized this system, and we all know that whenever politics gets involved in something, it makes it ineffective and inefficient. And unfortunately, my opponent is embedded in that political system. That is what he has done for his entire time. So ask yourself, he just admitted that Z. Smith Reynolds, he is the one. He funded defund the police. He funded the Antifa riots. He is endorsed right now. Z. Smith Reynolds did give money to the Antifa riots of 2020. Absolutely. And you know what, as a lawyer, he helped people get out on bail within 24 hours so they could go on to the next city of destruction. So he can talk a good game, but I want you to know what is at stake. He talks about grooming. Well, let me tell you, Planned Parenthood, go look up Amaze Jr. and Amaze. They are cartoons that are teaching our 4 to 9-year-olds how to masturbate. They're telling them that it is fine as a 4-year-old to poke and prod one another naked. Go watch it. It is being funded, it is being promoted by Planned Parenthood, who is one of his biggest supporters. As well, when you were talking about yesterday in a debate, he said that race is the most important thing about a person. I disagree with that vehemently. I believe that we should not be telling our white teachers that you need to apologize for your whiteness. We should not be telling our teachers that our minority students cannot perform because you have inherent racism. It's time for us to recognize that this social, this politically charged, this racially divisive, and this sexually inappropriate content is destroying our children, is destroying their future, and it is using the time that should be spent on academic excellence. I'm going to bring safety, academic excellence, and I'm going to make our schools be a place where our children are protected, parental rights are respected, and that we are giving them hope and purpose for the future. So if you want that to happen, if you want North Carolina schools to be the best that they can possibly be, then please vote Michelle Morrow. You can go to my website for more information,
No tomorrow.
morrow4nc.com.
No tomorrow.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the great state of North Carolina.
Michelle Morrow, thank you. We'll hold just for a second.
Wait, there are people there? Damn it, I wanted to go.
I guess we'll do 2 rounds of applause. Mo Green, your 3 minutes for a closing statement, please.
Great, thank you. I'm going to talk about experience, belief, and character. But before I do, I just want to spend just a moment talking about the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation and some of the allegations that she's brought before the community. Wow. And so when I started to think about it, I said, well, do I defend each point and this Antifa stuff? And I thought, well, maybe not, because this is the same person that puts out all kind of crazy QAnon conspiracy theories, Twix and witchcraft, celebrities drinking blood of children. And I thought, maybe I don't need to go there. Let's focus on the 3 things that matter. 1, experience. It's pretty darn clear that there's someone who's actually walked the walk, improved our public schools, and there's someone who can only simply talk the talk. 2, belief in our public schools. My wife and I, we were blessed. We were blessed to have 2 wonderful children. We were blessed to also be in a place where we could choose where we would send our children. We chose to put them in our public schools because we knew that they were good and that they would deliver, and they did. As opposed to my opponent who homeschools her children. Nothing at all against homeschooling, if that's what you choose to do. But to then go around and talk about our public schools are indoctrination centers and taken over by Satan and cesspools of evil lies and deception, and calling our teachers groomers, to think that this person would be in the chief administrative officer and chief advocacy officer for the state of North Carolina's public schools is frightening. 3rd, character. You heard what we did in Guilford County Schools as we tried to elevate the character of our students to the point that it was recognized as a national district of character, as opposed to my opponent who took her own children to the attempted insurrection on January 6th at the U.S. Capitol. Comes back from there and puts herself on video where there has literally been loss of life, and says, Trump, you're in office for 2 more weeks. How about you set aside the United States Constitution? How about you now invoke the Insurrection Act and have the military take over and arrest anyone for treason who was a part of that? This is a person who's called for the executions of many folks, listing certainly President Biden, as I did before, and Governor Cooper, and President Barack Obama. I call upon folks, is this the kind of character we want next to our children? And so you can certainly learn more about me by going to mogreen.nc.com. I would be honored, and so I respectfully request that you vote for me. It would be a tremendous honor to allow me to work on behalf of children for the state of North Carolina in our public schools.
In brief closing, I would just like to say thank you both to Michelle Morrow and Mo Green for being here today. Also thanks to the North Carolina PTA, as well as the Public Schools First NC organizations for bringing us here for this forum. As we conclude today, I do also want to encourage all of you here in the room and those of you with us streaming to learn more about early voting and the November 5th election. You can go to vote411.org and also the North Carolina State Board of Elections website. Thank you again for joining us today.
I wonder if they're going to shake hands.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Holy guacamole wakatuki. Let me turn this off. Hold on. Yes, I was typing. I realize that's annoying, but I had to take notes. She's even more far out than I thought. You know, I was thinking, like, what's the best way to deal with this? Like, of all the things she's saying. And I had this one thought, and I was like, boy, it would be awesome. So Michelle Morrow is saying, oh, we need to do all these things. These are important. And I have spent a lot of time in public school. So far, if you count all of my children's time there, let's see, it would be, 9, 18, 27, 35 years. So 35 years collectively, my kids have been in public school, right? And I have been president of the PTA at, I think, 3 schools, head of fundraising, getting ready to try to sell wrapping paper again. And so I have spent a lot of time at public school. Michelle Morrow literally has never dropped a child. She hasn't spent 5 seconds in a North Carolina public school. How could she possibly know what a problem would be? Like, that's just, at the end of the day, if you wanted me to be in charge of the economy of Africa, right? And then I told you, I've never been to Africa. You'd be like, well, is that really a good job for you? Now, if you said to me, she's running for QAnon secretary for first aid, I'd be like, I think she's good. I mean, honestly, it's rare that I'm speechless. She literally tweeted that Jim Carrey was drinking the blood of children. Does that worry anybody? She called for the public execution on pay-per-view of Barack Obama. I don't care if you like Barack Obama or not, but it's a teensy bit ironic when you talk about character and assault and violence in the school system. And how much of what she said of his affiliations. So I would ask you, Kathy, or I would ask anybody who thinks, well, maybe she made some good points. Look at what he did. Talk to people that were in his district. Superintendent of Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Guilford. I have not found one person that worked in the school district that didn't think he was amazing. I have not found one person in a school district that thinks Michelle Morrow is going to help them. And so I think what we really need to do between now and November 5th, and let me just say, I have 250 people watching this on Facebook and 107 on YouTube. If I do a live video, I typically have 2,000 people watching. People love to see my husband talking about, biking, but they don't want to hear about politics. Politics do not make me popular. I make no money talking about politics. All I do is lose followers because it's not the thing to do. So I'm doing this for myself. I'm not doing this because of a lobbyist. I am not doing this because people are giving me money. I am indebted to no one but myself. And I care about North Carolina. And I live in a rural area. And it is so important. And I think one thing that will be interesting to do is to get some of these superintendents around the state to come on and tell me what their schools are like and tell me what their needs are. Because to me, the superintendent's words should reflect the needs of the school system. And I haven't been a superintendent. So what I am knowledgeable about boots on the ground. I am in the school system. I talk to teachers. I buy school supplies. I sell wrapping paper. I read with students. I take the service dog in when I read with students. I have bought shoes for people. I have taken them to a fair. I have thrown up when I took the shoes off of a little girl whose parents didn't bathe her. I can tell you, I never knew what poverty was until I had kids in public school in Chowan County. I didn't know that sleeping on a couch was actually a good thing because I didn't know kids didn't have beds or a couch to sleep on, no pencils in their house. So when Michelle Morrow says, my number one goal is safety, I can tell you it's not mine. And I don't think it would be the teachers. But maybe she's right. Maybe it is. I don't see that. What I see is teachers feeling like they are being told to walk up a black diamond ski slope and to carry a load of concrete blocks. And no matter what, they're going to fail. And then on the other hand, charters and voucher schools, they're riding up on a snowmobile and they look successful because they don't have to carry all this baggage. We're setting them up to fail. Setting them up to fail. So she said, the money, we have bureaucratic bloat. We have 37 counties with no charter option. We have money. Healthy competition encourages good education. We need to focus on reading, writing, and math and critical thinking skills. We need to have this code of conduct, which she thinks people have taken from her website. So I would just ask you to look at, earlier this week, I shared this, which is pretty interesting. Oh, wait. Uh-oh. Well, maybe. Oh, wait, maybe it's in here. Hold on. I would just ask you to look at what Amos brought home this past week. So it's a anti-bullying parent-student contract, which is a code of conduct. So maybe Michelle Morrow is taking what's already being done in public schools and acting like it's a new concept. Treat everyone with kindness and respect. And my son Amos, who is 10 with a developmental disorder, autism, anxiety, and a genetic disorder. I am Amos. I promise that I will do my best to keep our school a safe and caring place. This means that I will treat everyone with kindness and respect, resolve disagreements with other students peacefully, never tease, hurt, name call, or bully another student, refuse to join in if I see someone else being bullied, ask for help from an adult if I am bullied or see someone else being bullied. Amos signed his name, he wrote his teacher, and he even signed my name, Mommy. This is a code of conduct. It already exists. I bet every school, public school in the state of North Carolina has a code of conduct. But when you have never set a toe in public school, you think you have just, it would be like being someone that had lived in a bunker and being like, I have this amazing idea. We're going to use phones that are not connected to cords. I'm going to make that happen. And then everybody would be like, hello. The Apple phone has been out for a while. Or I'm going to create a car that doesn't need gas. It's going to be electric. What you talking about, Willis? That already exists, but you didn't know that because you live in North Korea. I mean, that is just a worry. Like, she doesn't even know what's happening in schools. So she's going to make an agenda for it to happen. It's happened. And one thing she said at the end that worried me, let me find it. So she calls children with disabilities retarded. She says children with disabilities cannot compete and that they should not be in an atmosphere where they can compete. So I have this little boy who's in a typical fourth grade classroom, and he's competing. He sometimes does the best on the spelling test, and she just wants to throw him away, the baby with the bathwater. And one thing she said today is she said, hold on, let me find it. When children cannot or will not or cannot follow the rules, then it is time to take them out of the classroom. So I also have a little boy last year that broke somebody's water bottle because he needed a medication change, or maybe he kicked a bookcase. So she is going to say, if Amos cannot follow the rules, he's out of the classroom. I would like to, one, say that that's against federal law. And so when I hear her say, well, North Carolina doesn't need federal dollars, 1.1 billion she wants to refuse from the federal government because she doesn't want to have strings attached. So she wants to get rid of federal dollars, and she wants to bring back special education. So my son Amos will no longer have access to his typically developing peers. He will no longer have access potentially to public schools in North Carolina. Is this really where North Carolina wants to go? Because then Adrian and Thomas Wood and their $170,000 in taxes they pay every year will no longer be in North Carolina. We'll have to move. Let that sink in. Maybe it didn't affect you. Maybe you don't give a shit about people with disabilities. Michelle wants to incentivize and pay teachers more, but she wants to take away $1.1 billion. How are they going to get paid more when we have less money? I mean, it doesn't make sense. It would be like saying, I don't even know what it would be like saying, because it's not possible. It's like saying, well, if you spend more money on food, you'll have more money in your savings account. It's simple math. So she wants to bring back math and reading and critical thinking skills. She's unable to use critical thinking skills. '48th in pay in the country in adjusted income. The wealthiest of the wealthy are now getting public assistance in North Carolina, Mo Green said. The wealthiest of the wealthy. $480 million a year to pay for vouchers. $243 million a year will go to families who make over $150,000 a year. $40 million a year is going to pay for families who make over $250,000 a year for their kids to go to private school. Half of those children and families live in 10 counties. 10 counties in the whole state, 100 counties. 90% get the other 50%. 90% of those do not accept children with disabilities. Teachers are groomers. If you are a teacher out there, you really better be paying attention, because you have been called a groomer by the woman who thinks she is qualified to lead the state education system. I hope people are paying attention. You know, I don't vote straight ticket. I don't vote, I'm independent. I don't vote Republican. I don't vote Democrat. Michelle Morrow is a Republican, and I love Mo Green, and I think if Mo Green were running against Catherine Truitt, who is the current state superintendent, who's a Republican, I think the race would be very close. But the fact that Catherine Truitt said, I would not support Michelle Morrow as the current Republican, people should pay attention. It's a worry. It's a worry. And when Michelle Morrow talks about smartphones, just know that Guilford County already has kids put their smartphones in their backpack. Where we are, they have to leave them in their lockers. So this is not a new concept. It's already happening.